Power is one of the most misunderstood words in human psychology. When most people hear the word power, they imagine dominance, control, influence, the ability to command attention or shape the behavior of others. But Carl Jung believed that real power does not begin outside a person. It begins inside, and it often appears in a very quiet moment, a moment when a woman suddenly realizes something about herself that had always been there, but had never fully been claimed. For many women, this realization does not arrive through success. It does not arrive through recognition, and it does not arrive through approval. It arrives through awareness, the awareness that much of her life has been shaped by roles. Roles she learned to perform well, the helpful one, the understanding one, the accommodating one. These roles can look like strength, but over time, something begins to feel misaligned. Because the more a woman organizes her life around expectations, the more distant she can become from her own inner authority. Carl Jung described a similar pattern in his theory of the persona. The persona is the version of ourselves we present to the world, the social identity that allows us to belong, to function, to adapt. But Jung also warned that when we identify too strongly with the persona, we begin to forget who we are beneath it. And that is often where a woman's power has been waiting, hidden beneath the identity she learned to perform. The moment a woman realizes her power is rarely dramatic. It often begins with a quiet disruption, disappointment, exhaustion, a realization that something about her life no longer feels honest. And in that moment, something inside her begins to shift. She begins noticing things she once ignored. She notices how often she explains herself, how often she softens her voice to make others comfortable, how often she adjusts her boundaries in order to maintain peace. And slowly, a deeper realization emerges. Her power was never something she lacked. It was something she had been taught to restrain. Jung believed that much of the human psyche exists in what he called the shadow. The shadow contains everything we were taught to hide. Qualities that were discouraged, traits that seemed unacceptable. But the shadow does not only contain weakness, it often contains strength. For many women, the shadow may contain things like anger, ambition, assertiveness, the ability to say no, the desire to take up space. These qualities are not dangerous, but they can feel dangerous if a person has spent years being rewarded for suppressing them. That is why many moments of empowerment are actually moments of shadow integration. A woman does not suddenly become powerful. She simply stops rejecting the parts of herself that already were. When that happens, something interesting begins to occur. The energy that once went into self-suppression becomes available again. The energy that once maintained harmony at all costs begins to shift towards self-respect. And this creates a psychological turning point, because power is not simply confidence. Power is alignment. Alignment between what a person believes, what they feel, and what they are willing to act upon. Modern psychology describes a similar process through the idea of self-efficacy, the belief that one is capable of acting, persisting, and influencing outcomes. But before action comes something deeper. Permission, the permission to trust one's own internal voice. For many women, this is the real awakening. They begin to realize that authority does not need to be borrowed from others. It can exist within them. Jung sometimes described this process as individuation, the gradual movement toward becoming a whole person. Not the version of ourselves that others expect, but the version that feels internally coherent. This process is rarely comfortable, because wholeness requires confrontation. A woman may have to confront the anger she once suppressed, the ambition she once minimized, the voice she once softened, and sometimes she must confront the uncomfortable truth that certain relationships only existed because she remained smaller than she truly was. This can be one of the most difficult stages of growth, because as a woman begins aligning with her true self, her tolerance for certain dynamics changes. She may notice that some people become uneasy around her clarity. Others may quietly withdraw. But something equally important begins to appear. Respect. Not the fragile respect that depends on constant approval, but the deeper respect that comes from authenticity. When a woman becomes internally aligned, her presence changes. She speaks less, but her words carry more weight. She apologizes less, but her intentions become clearer. She explains less, but others begin listening more carefully. And slowly, the world begins responding to her differently. Not because she has become louder, but because she has become centered. Jung believed that the human psyche moves toward wholeness, toward integration, toward a deeper harmony between the conscious self and the unconscious. And when this harmony begins to appear, life often feels different. Choices become clearer. Boundaries become easier. Direction becomes more obvious. The moment a woman realizes her power is not a transformation into someone new. It is a return to the parts of herself that were once hidden, the parts that once felt too strong, too direct, too ambitious. But when those parts are welcomed instead of rejected, something remarkable happens. A woman no longer needs to convince the world of her value. She simply begins living from it, and that quiet shift changes everything. Carl Jung once said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. The moment a woman recognizes her power is the moment she begins making that unconscious truth visible, not through force, but through awareness. And once a woman begins living from that awareness, she rarely returns to the version of herself that existed before. If you enjoy exploring psychology, self-awareness, and the deeper ideas of thinkers like Carl Jung, consider subscribing, because sometimes the most important transformations in life begin with a single realization.